we're in an awkward position here.
Oh, please, Senor Griffin, just one more week. I will pay you double.
Perhaps we can work out another arrangement.
Oh, please, Senor, not my beloved.
Armando, it is for the children. Oh, Dios mío.
Hey, this is gonna kick more ass than that magical riot took. Well, we are officially lost.
On the great space
Oh, shut up, Ricky! Just shut up right now! Unless the next words out of your mouth and directions how to get back to the fish skeleton, I'm gonna punch you right in the stomach. I promise you'll love it here, even more than Julia Roberts loves herself.
Hi, I'm Julia Roberts. You know, a lot of people died in the tsunami, but don't worry, I didn't. And I'll be here to entertain you and love my life for many, many years to come. Me.
They don't give up. Not ever. Once they have your scent, Rome, it seems. Chapter 17. Choices. We'll run for it, Rand said. Huron, can you gallop and still follow the trail? Yes, Lord Rand. Then push on, we will... It won't do any good, Celine said. Her white mare was the only one of their mounts not dancing at the gruff barks coming from the Groll. They don't give up. Not ever. Once they have your scent, Grom keep coming, day and night, until they run you down. You must kill them all or find a way to go elsewhere.
Probably not gonna have many birds. I scared them all away. Yeah.
Rand, the portal stone can take us elsewhere. No, we can kill them. I can.
Yep.
I already killed one. There are only 5. If I can just find... He cast around for the spot he needed and found it. Follow me. Digging his heels in, he set Red to a gallop, confident before he heard their hooves that the others would come. The place he had chosen was a low, round hill, bare of trees. Nothing could come close without him seeing. He swung down from his saddle and unlimbered his longbow. Loyal and Huron joined him on the ground, the Ogier hefting his huge quarterstaff, the Sniffer with his short sword in his fist. Neither quarterstaff nor sword would be of much use if the Grom closed with them. I won't let them get close. This risk is not necessary, Celine said. She barely looked toward the Grom, bending from her saddle to concentrate on Rand. We can easily reach the portal stone ahead of them. I will stop them. Hastily, Rand counted the arrows remaining in his quiver. 18, each as long as his arm, 10 of them with points like chisels, designed to drive through Trolloc armor. They would do as well for Grom as for Trollocs. He stuck 4 of those upright in the ground in front of him. A 5th he knocked to the bow. Loyal, Huron, you can do no good down here. Mount and be ready to take Celine to the stone if any get through. He wondered whether he could kill one of the things with his sword, if it came to that. You are mad. Even the power is not as bad as this. said something, but he did not hear. He was already seeking the void, as much to escape his own thoughts as for need. You know what's waiting, but this way I don't have to touch it. The glow was there, the light just out of sight. It seemed to flow toward him, but the emptiness was all. Thoughts darted across the surface of the void, visible in that tainted light. Saidin. The power. Madness. Death. Extraneous thoughts. He was one with the bow, with the arrow, with the things topping the next rise. The Grom came on, overreaching one another in their leaps. 5 great leathery shapes, triple-eyed with horny maws gaping. Their grunting calls rebounded from the void, barely heard. Rand was not aware of raising his bow or drawing the fletching against his cheek to his ear. He was one with the beasts, one with the center eye of the first. Then the arrow was gone. The first Grom died. One of its companions leaped on it as it fell, beak of a mouth dripping gobbets of flesh. It snarled at the others, and they circled wide. But they came on, and as if compelled, it abandoned its meal and leaped after them, its horny maw already bloody. Rand worked smoothly, unconsciously. Knock and release. Knock and release. The 5th arrow left his bow, and he lowered it, still deep in the void, as the 4th Grom fell like a huge puppet with its strings cut. Though the final arrow still flew, somehow he knew there was no need for another shot. The last beast collapsed as if its bones had melted, a feathered shaft jutting from its center eye. Always the center eye. Magnificent, Lord Rand, Huron said. I've never seen shooting like that. The void held Rand. The light called to him, and he reached toward it. It surrounded him, filled him. Lord Rand? Huron touched his arm, and Rand gave a start, the emptiness filling up with what was around him. Are you all right, my lord? Rand brushed his forehead with fingertips. It was dry. He felt as if it should have been covered with sweat. I'm fine, Huron. It grows easier each time you do it, I've heard, Celine said. The more you live in the oneness, the easier. Rand glanced at her. Well, I don't need it again, not for a while. What happened? I wanted to. He still wanted to, he realized with horror. He wanted to go back into the void, wanted to feel that light filling him again. It had seemed as if he were truly alive then, sickliness and all. And now was only an imitation. No, worse. He had been almost alive, knowing what alive would be like. All he had to do was reach out to Saidin. Not again, he muttered. He gazed off at the dead Grom. 5 monstrous shapes lying on the ground. Not dangerous anymore. Now he can be on our... A coughing bark, all too familiar, sounded beyond the dead Grom, beyond the next hill, and others answered it. Still more came, from the east, from the west. Rand half raised his bow. How many arrows do you have left? Celine demanded. Can you kill 20 Grom? 30? 100? We must go to the portal stone. She is right, Rand, Loyal said slowly. You do not have any choice now. Huron was watching Rand anxiously. The Grom called. a score of barks overlapping. A stone, Rand agreed reluctantly. Angrily, he threw himself back into his saddle, slung the bow on his back. Lead us to this stone, Selene. With a nod, she turned her mare and heeled it to a trot. Rand and the others followed, they eagerly, he holding back. The barks of Grom pursued them, hundreds it seemed. It sounded as if the Grom were ranged in a semicircle around them, closing in from every direction but the front. Swiftly and surely, Selene led them through the hills. The land rose in the beginning of mountains, slopes steepening so the horses scrambled over washed-out-looking rocky outcrops, and the sparse, faded-looking brush that clung to them. The way became harder, the land slanting more and more upward. We're not going to make it, Rand thought. The fifth time Red slipped and slid backwards in a shower of stone. Loyal threw his quarterstaff aside. It would be of no use against Grom, and it only slowed him. The Ogier had given up riding. He used one hand to haul himself up, and then pulled his tall horse behind him with the other. The hairy, fat-like animal made heavy going, but easier than with Loyal on its back. Grom barked behind them, closer now. Then Selene drew rein and pointed to a hollow nestled below them in the granite. It was all there, the 7 wide colored stairs around a pale floor, and the tall stone column in the middle. She dismounted and led her mare into the hollow, down the stairs to the column. It loomed over her. She turned to look back up at Rand and the others. The Grom gave their grunting barks, scores of them, loud, near. They will be on us soon, she said. You must use the stone, Rand, or else find a way to kill all the Grom. With a sigh, Rand got down from his saddle and led Red into the hollow. Loyal and Huron followed hastily. He stared at the symbol-covered column, the portal stone, uneasily. She must be able to channel, even if she doesn't know it, or it couldn't have brought her here. The power doesn't harm women. If this brought you here, he began, but she interrupted him. I know what it is, she said firmly, but I do not know how to use it. You must do what must be done. She traced one symbol, a little larger than the others, with a finger. A triangle standing on its point inside a circle. This stands for the true world, our world. I believe it will help if you hold it in your mind while you... She spread her hands as if unsure exactly what it was he was supposed to do. My lord, Huron said diffidently. There isn't much time. He glanced over his shoulder at the rim of the hollow. The barking was louder. Those things will be here in minutes now. Loyal nodded. Drawing a deep breath, Rand put his hand on the symbol Selene had pointed out. He looked at her to see if he was doing it right, but she merely watched. Not even the slightest frown of worry wrinkling her pale forehead. She's confident you can save her. You have to. The scent of her filled his nostrils. My lord. Rand swallowed and sought the void. It came easily, springing up around him without effort. Emptiness. Emptiness except for the light. Wavering in a way that turned his stomach. Emptiness except for Saidin. But even the queasiness was distant. He was one with the portal stone. The column felt smooth and slightly oily under his hand, but the triangle and circle seemed warm against the brand on his palm. Have to get them to safety. Have to get them home. The light drifted toward him, it seemed, surrounded him, and he embraced it. Light filled him. Heat filled him. He could see the stone, see the others watching him. Loyal and Huron anxiously, Celine showing no doubt that he could save her. But they might as well not have been there. The light was all. The heat and the light suffusing his limbs like water sinking into dry sand, filling him. The symbol burned against his flesh. He tried to suck it all in. All the heat, all the light, all. The symbol. Suddenly, as if the sun had gone out for a blink of an eye, the world flickered. And again. The symbol was a live coal under his hand. He drank in the light. The world flickered, flickered. It made him sick, that light. It was water to a man dying of thirst. Flicker. He sucked at it. It made him want to vomit. He wanted it all. Flicker. The triangle and circle seared him. He could feel it charring his hand. Flicker. He wanted it all. He screamed, howling with pain, howling with wanting. Flicker, 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 flicker. Hands pulled at him. He was only vaguely aware of them. He staggered back. The void was slipping away. The light and the sickness that twisted at him. The light. He watched it go regretfully. Light. That's crazy to want it. But I was so full of it. I was so... dazed. He stared at Celine. It was she who held his shoulders, stared wonderingly into his eyes. He raised his hand in front of his face. The Heron brand was there, but nothing else. No triangle and circle burned into his flesh. Remarkable, Celine said slowly. She glanced at Loyal and Huron. The Ogier looked stunned, his eyes as big as plates. The sniffer was squatting with one hand on the ground, as if unsure he could support himself else. All of us here, and all of our horses. And you do not even know what you did. Remarkable. Are we? Rand began hoarsely, and had to stop to swallow. Look around you, Celine said. You've brought us home. She gave a sudden laugh. You brought all of us home. For the first time, Rand became aware of his surroundings again. The hollow surrounded them without any stairs, though here and there lay a suspiciously smooth piece of stone, colored red or blue. The column lay against the mountainside, half buried in the loose rock of a fall. The symbols were unclear here. Wind and water had worked long on them, and everything looked real. The colors were solid, the granite a strong gray, the brush green and brown. After that other place, it seemed almost too vivid. Home, Rand breathed, and then he was laughing too. We're home! Loyal's laughter sounded like a bull bellowing. Huron danced a caper. You did it, Celine said, leaning closer until her face filled Rand's eyes. I knew that you could. Rand's laughter died. I suppose I did. He glanced at the fallen portal stone and managed a weak laugh. I wish I knew what it was I did, though. Celine looked deep into his eyes. Perhaps one day you will know, she said softly. You are surely destined for great things. Her eyes seemed as dark and deep as night, as soft as velvet. Her mouth? If I kissed her. He blinked and stepped back hurriedly, clearing his throat. Celine, please don't tell anyone about this. About the portal stone and me. I don't understand it, and neither will anybody else. You know how people are about things they don't understand. Her face wore no expression at all. Suddenly, he wished very much that Matt and Perrin were there. Perrin knew how to talk to girls, and Matt could lie with a straight face. He could manage neither very well. Suddenly, Celine smiled and dropped a half-mocking curtsy. I will keep your secret, my Lord Randolph Thor. Rand glanced at her and cleared his throat again. Is she angry with me? She'd certainly be angry if I had tried to kiss her, I think. He wished she would not look at him as she was, as if she knew what he was thinking. Huron, is there any chance the Dark Friends used this stone before us? The sniffer shook his head ruefully. They were angling to the west of here, Lord Rand. Unless these portal stone things are more common than I've seen, I'd say they're still in that other world. But it wouldn't take me an hour to check it. The land's the same here as there. I could find the place here where I lost the trail there, if you see what I mean, and see if they've already gone by. Rand glanced at the sky. The sun, a wonderfully strong sun, not pale at all, sat low in the west, stretching their shadows out across the hollow. Another hour would bring full twilight. In the morning, he said. But I fear we've lost them. We can't lose that dagger. We can't. Celine, if that's the case, in the morning we will take you on to your home. Is it in the city of Kyrian itself, or... You may not have lost the Horn of Valir yet, Celine said slowly. As you know, I do know a few things about those worlds. Mirrors of the Wheel, Loyal said. She gave him a look, then nodded. Yes, exactly. Those worlds truly are mirrors in a way, especially the ones where there are no people. Some of them reflect only great events in the true world, but some have a shadow of that reflection even before the event occurs. The passage of the Horn of Valir would certainly be a great event. Reflections of what will be are fainter than reflections of what is, or what was, just as Huron says the trail he followed was faint. Huron blinked incredulously. You mean to say, milady, I've been smelling where those Dark Friends are going to be? The light help me, I wouldn't like that. It's bad enough smelling where violence has been, without smelling where it will be, too. There can't be many spots where there won't be some kind of violence sometime. It would drive me crazy like as not. That place we just left nearly did. I could smell it all the time there. Killing and hurting, and the vilest evil you could think of. I could even smell it on us. On all of us. Even on you, my lady, if you'll forgive me for saying so. It was just that place, twisting me the way it twisted your eye. He gave himself a shake. I'm glad we're out of there. I can't get it out of my nostrils yet all the way. Rand rubbed absently at the brand on his palm. What do you think, Loyal? Could we really be ahead of Thane's Dark Friends? The Ogier shrugged, frowning. I don't know, Rand. I don't know anything about any of this. I think we are back in our world. I think we are in Kinslayer's dagger. Beyond that, he shrugged again. We should be seeing you home, Celine, Rand said. Your people will be worried about you. A few days will see if I'm right, she said impatiently. Huron can find where he left the trail. He said so. We can watch over it. The Horn of Valir cannot be much longer reaching here. The Horn of Valir, Rand. Think of it. The man who sounds the horn will live in legend forever. I don't want anything to do with legends, he said sharply. What if the Dark Friends get by you? What if Ingtar lost them? Then the Dark Friends have the Horn of Valir forever, and Matt dies. All right. A few days. At the worst, we'll probably meet Ingtar and the others. I can't imagine they've stopped or turned back just because we went away. A wise decision, Rand, Celine said, and well thought out. She touched his arm and smiled, and he found himself again thinking of kissing her. We need to be closer to where they'll come, if they do come. Huron, can you find us a camp before dark? Somewhere we can watch the place where you lost the trail? He glanced at the portal stone and thought about sleeping near it. Thought of the way the void had crept up on him in sleep the last time, and the light in the void. Somewhere well away from here. Leave it in my hands, Lord Rand. The sniffer scrambled to his saddle. I vow I'll never sleep again without first I see what kind of stone there is nearby. As Rand rode Red up out of the hollow, he found himself watching Celine more than he did Huron. She seemed so cool and self-possessed. No older than he, yet queenly. But when she smiled at him, as she did just then, Egwene wouldn't have said I was wise. Egwene would have called me a woolhead. Irritably, he healed Red's flanks.
Chapter 18. To the White Tower. Egwene balanced on the healing deck as the River Queen sped down the wide Aranon under cloud-dark skies, sails full-bellied, white flame banner whipping furiously at the mainmast. The wind had risen as soon as the last of them was aboard the ships, back in Meadow, and it had not failed or flagged for an instant since, day or night. The river had begun to race in flood as it still did, slapping the ships about while it drove them onward. Wind and river had not slowed, and neither had the ships, all clustered together. The River Queen led, only right for the vessel that carried the Amerlin seat. The helmsman held his tiller grimly, feet planted and spread, and sailors padded barefoot at their work, intent on what they did. When they glanced at the sky or the river, they tore their eyes away with low mutters. A village was just fading from view behind, and a boy raced along the bank. He had kept up with the ships for a short distance, but now they were leaving him behind. When he vanished, Egwene made her way below. In the small cabin they shared, Nynaeve glared up at her from the narrow bed. They say we'll reach Tar Valon today. The light helped me, but I'll be glad to put foot on land again, even if it isn't Tar Valon. The ship lurched with wind and current, and Nynaeve swallowed. I'll never step on a boat again, she said breathlessly. Egwene shook the river spray out of her cloak and hung it on a peg by the door. It was not a big cabin. There were no big cabins on the ship, it seemed. Not even the one the Amerlin had taken over from the captain, though that was larger than the rest. With its 2 beds built into the walls, shelves beneath them and cabinets above, everything lay close to hand. Except for keeping her balance, the movements of the ship did not bother her the way they did Nynaeve. She had given up offering Nynaeve food after the 3rd time the wisdom threw the bowl at her. "I'm worried about Rand," she said. "I'm worried about all of them," Nynaeve replied dully. After a moment she said, "Another dream last night? The way you've been staring at nothing since you got up." Egwene nodded. She had never been very good at keeping things from Nynaeve, and she had not tried with the dreams. Nynaeve had tried to dose her at first, until she heard one of the Aes Sedai was interested. Then she began to believe. It was like the others. Different, but the same. Rand is in some kind of danger. I know it. And it is getting worse. He's done something, or he's going to do something that puts him in... She dropped down on her bed and leaned toward the other woman. "I just wish I could make some sense of it." "Channeling," Nynaeve said softly. Despite herself, Egwene looked around to see if anyone was there to hear. They were alone, with the door closed, but still she spoke just as softly. "I don't know. Maybe." There was no telling what Aes Sedai could do. She had seen enough already to make her believe every story of their powers, and she would not risk eavesdropping. "I won't risk Rand. If I did right, I'd tell them. But Moiraine knows, and she hasn't said anything. And it's Rand. I can't. I don't know what to do." "Has Anaya said anything more about these dreams?" Nynaeve seemed to make it a point never to add the honorific Sedai, even when the 2 of them were alone. Most of the Aes Sedai appeared not to care, but the habit had earned a few strange looks, and some hard ones. She was going to train in the White Tower, after all. "The wheel weaves as the wheel wills," Egwene quoted Anaya. "The boy is far away, child, and there's nothing we can do until we know more. I will see to testing you myself once we reach the White Tower, child." "Ah, she knows there is something in these dreams. I can tell she does. I like the woman, Nynaeve. I do. But she won't tell me what I want to know. And I can't tell her everything. Maybe if I could." The man in the mask again. Egwene nodded. Somehow she was sure it was better not to tell Anaya about him. She could not imagine why, but she was sure. 3 times the man whose eyes were afire had been in her dreams, each time when she dreamed a dream that convinced her Rand was in danger. He always wore a mask across his face. Sometimes she could see his eyes, and sometimes she could only see fire where they should be. He laughed at me. It was so contemptuous. As though I were a puppy he was going to have to push out of his way with his foot. It frightens me. He frightens me. Are you sure it has anything to do with the other dreams? With Rand? Sometimes a dream is just a dream. Egwene threw up her hands. And sometimes, Nynaeve, you sound just like Anaya Sedai. She put a special emphasis on the title, and was pleased to see Nynaeve grimace. "If I ever get out of this bed, Egwene." A knock at the door cut off whatever Nynaeve had been going to say. Before Egwene could speak or move, the Amerlin herself came in and shut the door behind her. She was alone, for a wonder. She seldom left her cabin, and then always with Liana at her side, and maybe another of the Aes Sedai. Egwene sprang to her feet. The room was a little crowded with 3 of them in it. Both of you feeling well? She tilted her head at Nynaeve. Eating well, too, I trust? In good temper? Nynaeve struggled to a sitting position with her back against the wall. My temper is just fine, thank you. We are honored, Mother, Egwene began, but the Amyrlin waved her to silence. It's good to be on the water again, but it grows boring as a mill pond after a while with nothing to do. The ship heeled, and she shifted her balance without seeming to notice. I will give you your lesson today. She folded herself onto the end of Egwene's bed, feet tucked under her. Sit, child. Egwene sat, but Nynaeve began trying to push herself to her feet. I think I will go on deck. I said sit. The Amyrlin's voice cracked like a whip, but Nynaeve kept rising, wavering. She still had both hands on the bed, but she was almost upright. Egwene held herself ready to catch her when she fell. Closing her eyes, Nynaeve slowly lowered herself back to the bed. Perhaps I will stay. It is no doubt windy up there. The Amyrlin barked a laugh. They told me you had a temper in you like a fisher bird with a bone in its throat. Some of them, child, say you do well for some time as a novice, no matter how old you are. I say if you have the ability I hear of, you deserve to be one of the accepted. She gave another laugh. I always believe in giving people what they deserve. Yes, I suspect you will learn a great deal once you reach the White Tower. I'd rather one of the warders taught me how to use a sword, Nynaeve growled. She swallowed convulsively and opened her eyes. There is someone I'd like to use it on. Egwene looked at her sharply. Did Nynaeve mean the Amyrlin, which was stupid and dangerous besides, or Lan? She snapped at Egwene every time Lan was mentioned. A sword, the Amyrlin said. I never thought swords were much use, even if you have the skill, child. There are always men who have as much and a deal more strength. But if you want a sword... She held up her hand. Egwene gasped, and even Nynaeve's eyes bulged, and there was a sword in it. With blade and hilt of an odd bluish white, it looked somehow cold. Made from the air, child, with air. It's as good as most steel blades, better than most, but still not much use. The sword became a paring knife. There was no shrinking. It just was one thing, then the other. This now is useful. The paring knife turned to mist, and the mist faded away. The Amyrlin put her empty hand back in her lap. But either takes more effort than it is worth. Better, easier, simply to carry a good knife with you. You have to learn when to use your ability as well as how, and when it's better to do things the way any other woman would. Let a blacksmith make knives for gutting fish. Use the one power too often and too freely, and you can come to like it too much. That way lies danger. You begin to want more of it, and sooner or later you run the risk of drawing more than you've learned to handle. And that can burn you out like a guttered candle, or... If I must learn all this, Nynaeve broke in stiffly, I would as soon learn something useful. All this... Make the air stir, Nynaeve. Light the candle, Nynaeve. Now put it out. Light it again. Ha! Egwene closed her eyes for a moment. Please, Nynaeve. Please keep a check on your temper. She bit her lip to keep from saying it out loud. The Amyrlin was silent for a moment. Useful, she said at last. Something useful. You wanted a sword. Suppose a man came at me with a sword. What would I do? Something useful, you can be sure. This, I think. For an instant, Egwene thought she saw a glow around the woman at the other end of her bed. Then the air seemed to thicken. Nothing changed that Egwene could see, but she could surely feel it. She tried to lift her arm. It did not budge any more than if she were buried to her neck in thick jelly. Nothing could move except her head. "Release me," Nynaeve grated. Her eyes glared and her head jerked from side to side, but the rest of her sat as rigidly as a statue. Egwene realized that she was not the only one held. "Let me go!" Useful, wouldn't you say? And it is nothing but air. The Amyrlin spoke in a conversational tone as if they were all chatting over tea. Big man with his muscles and his sword, and the sword does him as much good as the hair on his chest. "Let me go, I say. And if I don't like where he is, why, I can pick him up." Nynaeve squawked furiously as she slowly rose, still in a sitting position, until her head almost touched the ceiling. The Amyrlin smiled. "I've often wished I could use this to fly. The records say Aes Sedai couldn't work like that. You might have hands and pick up a chest that weighs as much as you do. You look strong. But take hold of yourself however you will, you cannot pick yourself up." Nynaeve's head jerked furiously, but not another muscle of her twitched. "The lit burn you, let me go!" Egwene swallowed hard and hoped she was not also to be lifted. "So," the Amyrlin continued, "big, hairy man and so forth. He can do nothing to me, while I can do anything at all to him. Why, if I had a mind to..." She leaned forward, her eyes intent on Nynaeve. Suddenly her smile did not seem very friendly. "I could turn him upside down and paddle his bottom, just like..." Suddenly the Amyrlin flew backwards so hard, her head rebounded from the wall, and there she stayed, as if something were pressing against her. Egwene stared, her mouth dry. "This isn't happening. It isn't." "They were right," the Amyrlin said. Her voice sounded strained, as though she found it hard to breathe. "They said you learned quickly, and they said it took your temper burning to get to the heart of what you can do." She took a struggling breath. "Shall we release each other together, child?" Nynaeve, floating in the air with her eyes ablaze, said, "You let me go right now or I'll..." Abruptly, a look of amazement came over her face, a look of loss. Her mouth worked silently. The Amyrlin sat up, working her shoulders. "You don't know everything yet, do you, child? Not the 100th part of everything. You did not suspect I could cut you off from the true source. You can still feel it there, but you can't touch it any more than a fish can touch the moon. When you learn enough to be raised to full sisterhood, no one woman will be able to do that to you. The stronger you become, the more Aes Sedai it will take to shield you against your will. Do you think now you want to learn?" Nynaeve pressed her mouth shut in a thin line and stared her in the eye grimly. The Amerlin sighed. If you had a hair less potential than you do, child, I would send you to the Mistress of Novices and tell her to keep you the rest of your life. But you will get what you deserve. Nynaeve's eyes widened, and she had just time to start a yell before she dropped, hitting her bed with a loud thud. Egwene winced. The mattresses were thin and the wood beneath hard. Nynaeve's face stayed frozen as she shifted the way she sat, just a fraction. And now, the Amerlin said firmly, unless you would like further demonstration, we will get on with your lesson. Continue your lesson, we might say. Mother? Egwene said faintly. She still could not twitch below her chin. The Amerlin looked at her questioningly, then smiled. Oh, I am sorry, child. Your friend was occupying my attention, I'm afraid. Suddenly, Egwene could move again. She raised her arms just to convince herself that she could. Are you both ready to learn? Yes, Mother, Egwene said quickly. The Amerlin raised an eyebrow at Nynaeve. After a moment, Nynaeve said in a tight voice, Yes, Mother. Egwene heaved a sigh of relief. Good. Now then, empty your thoughts of everything but a flower bud. Egwene was sweating by the time the Amerlin left. She had thought that some of the other Aes Sedai had been hard teachers, but that smiling, plain-faced woman coaxed out every last drop of effort, drew it out, and when there was nothing left, she seemed to reach into you and pulled it out. It had gone well, though. As the door closed behind the Amerlin, Egwene raised one hand. A tiny flame sprang to life, balanced a hair-breadth above the tip of her forefinger, then danced from fingertip to fingertip. She was not supposed to do this without a teacher, one of the accepted at the very least, to watch over her, but she was too excited at her progress to pay any mind to that. Nynaeve bounded to her feet and threw her pillow at the closing door. That vile, contemptible, miserable hag! The light burn her. I'd like to feed her to the fish. I'd like to dose her with things that would turn her green for the rest of her life. I don't care if she's old enough to be my mother. If I had her in Emond's Field, she wouldn't sit down comfortably for... Her teeth ground so loudly that Egwene jumped. Letting the flame die, Egwene put her eyes firmly on her lap. She wished she could think of a way to sneak out of the room without catching Nynaeve's eye. The lesson had not gone well for Nynaeve, because she had held her temper on a tight lead until the Amerlin was gone. She never could do very much unless she was angry, and then it all burst out of her. After failure upon failure, the Amerlin had done everything she could to rouse her again. Egwene wished Nynaeve could forget she had been there to see or hear any of it. Nynaeve stalked stiffly to her bed and stood staring at the wall behind it, her fist clenched at her side. Egwene looked longingly at the door. It was not your fault, Nynaeve said, and Egwene gave a start. Nynaeve turned to look down at her. It was not your fault, she repeated, sounding unconvinced. But if you ever breathe one word, I'll... Not a word, Egwene said quickly. I don't even remember anything to breathe a word about. Nynaeve stared at her a moment longer, then nodded. Abruptly, she grimaced. Light. I did not think anything tasted worse than raw sheep's tongue root. I'll remember that the next time you act the goose, so watch yourself. Egwene winced. That had been the first thing the Amerlin had done trying to rouse Nynaeve's anger. A dark blob of something that glistened like grease and smelled vile had suddenly appeared, and while the Amerlin held Nynaeve with the power, had been forced into the wisdom's mouth. The Amerlin had even held her nose to make her swallow, and Nynaeve remembered things, if she had seen them done once. Egwene did not think there was any way of stopping her if she took it into her mind to do it. For all her own success in making a flame dance, she could never have held the Amerlin against a wall. At least being on the ship isn't making you sick anymore. Nynaeve grunted, then gave a short, sharp laugh. I'm too angry to be sick. With another mirthless laugh, she shook her head. I'm too miserable to be sick. Light, I feel as if I've been dragged through a knothole backwards. If that is what novice training is like, you will have incentive to learn quickly. Egwene scowled at her knees. Compared to Nynaeve, the Amerlin had only coaxed her, smiled at her successes, sympathized with her failures, then coaxed again. But all the Aes Sedai had said things would be different in the White Tower. Harder, though they would not say how. If she had to go through what Nynaeve had day after day, she did not think she could stand it. Something changed in the motion of the ship. The rocking eased, and feet thumped on the deck above their heads. A man shouted something Egwene could not quite make out. She looked up at Nynaeve. Do you think Tar Valon? There is only one way to find out, Nynaeve replied, and determinedly took her cloak from its peg. When they reached the deck, sailors were running everywhere, heaving at lines, shortening sail, readying long sweeps. The wind had died to a breeze, and the clouds were scattering now. Egwene rushed to the rail. It is Tar Valon! Nynaeve joined her with an expressionless face. The island was so big, it looked more as if the river split in two than contained a bit of land. Bridges that seemed to be made of lace arched from either bank to the island, crossing marshy ground as well as the river. The walls of the city, the shining walls of Tar Valon, glistened white as the sun broke through the clouds. And on the west bank, its broken top leaking a thin wisp of smoke, Dragonmount reared black against the sky, one mountain standing among flatlands and rolling hills. Dragonmount, where the dragon had died. Dragonmount, made by the dragons dying. Egwene wished she did not think of Rand when she looked at the mountain. A man channeling. Light help him. The River Queen passed through a wide opening in a tall circular wall that thrust out into the river. Inside, one long wharf surrounded a round harbor. Sailors furled the last sails and used sweeps alone to move the ship's stern first to its docking. Around the long wharf, the other ships that had come downriver were now being snugged into their berths among the ships already there. The white flame banners set workers scurrying along the already busy wharf. The Amerlin came on deck before the shorelines were tied off, but dock workers ran a gangplank aboard as soon as she appeared. Lyanna walked at her side, flame-tipped staff in hand, and the other Aes Sedai on the ship followed them ashore. None of them so much as glanced at Egwene or Nynaeve. On the wharf, a delegation greeted the Amerlin, shawled Aes Sedai bowing formally, kissing the Amerlin's ring. The wharf bustled between ships unloading and the Amerlin's seat arriving. Soldiers formed up on disembarking. Men set booms for cargo. Trumpet flourishes rang from the walls, competing with cheers from the onlookers. Nynaeve gave a loud sniff.
There you go.
It seems they've forgotten us. Come along, we'll see to ourselves. Egwene was reluctant to leave her first sight of Tar Valon, but she followed Nynaeve below to gather their things. When they came back topside, bundles in their arms, soldiers and trumpets were gone, and Aes Sedai too. Men were swinging back hatches along the deck and lowering cables into the holds. On the deck, Nynaeve caught a dockman's arm, a burly fellow in a coarse brown shirt with no sleeves. "Our horses," she began. "I'm busy," he growled, pulling free.
Hey.
"Horses'll all be took to the White Tower." He looked them up and down. "If you've business with the tower, best you take yourselves on. I said I don't hold with newlings being tardy." Another man wrestling with a bale being swung out of the hold on a cable shouted to him, and he left the women without a backwards glance.
There you go, buddy.
Egwene exchanged looks with Nynaeve. It seemed they really were on their own. Nynaeve stalked off the ship with grim determination on her face, but Egwene made her way dejectedly down the gangplank and through the tarry smell that hung over the wharf. All that talk about wanting us here, and now they don't seem to care. Broad stairs led up from the dock to a wide arch of dark redstone. On reaching it, Egwene and Nynaeve stopped to stare. Every building seemed a palace, though most of those close to the arch seemed to contain inns or shops from the signs over the doors. Fanciful stonework was everywhere, and the lines of one structure seemed designed to complement and set off the next, leading the eye along as if everything were part of one vast design. Some structures did not look like buildings at all, but like gigantic waves breaking, or huge shells, or fanciful wind-sculpted cliffs. Right in front of the arch lay a broad square with a fountain and trees, and Egwene could see another square further on. Above everything rose the towers, tall and graceful, some with sweeping bridges behind them,
There you go.
high in the sky. And over all rose one tower, higher and wider than all the rest, as white as the shining walls themselves. "Air takes the breath at first sight," said a woman's voice behind them. "At 10th sight for that, and at 100th. Egwene turned. The woman was Aes Sedai. Egwene was sure of it, though she wore no shawl. No one else had that ageless look, and she held herself with an assurance, a confidence that seemed to confirm it. A glance at her hand showed the golden ring, the serpent biting its own tail.
There you go.
The Aes Sedai was a little plump, with a warm smile, and one of the oddest appearing women Egwene had ever seen. Her plumpness could not hide high cheekbones. Her eyes had a tilt to them, and were the clearest, palest green, and her hair was almost the color of fire. Egwene barely stopped herself from goggling at that hair, those slightly slanted eyes. Ogier built, of course, the Aes Sedai went on. And their best work ever, some say. One of the first cities built after the breaking. There weren't 500,000 people here altogether then, no more than 20 sisters, but they built for what would be needed. "It is a lovely city," Nynaeve said. "We are supposed to go to the White Tower. We came here for training, but no one seems to care if we go or stay." "They care," the woman said, smiling. "I came here to meet you, but I was delayed speaking with the Amyrlin. I am Shiriam, the mistress of novices. I am not to be a novice, Nynaeve said in a firm voice, but a little too quickly. The Amerlin herself said I was to be one of the accepted. So I was told. Shiriam sounded amused. I have never heard of it being done so before, but they say you are exceptional. Remember, though, even one of the accepted can be called to my study. It requires more breaking of the rules than for a novice, but it has been known to happen. She turned to Egwene as if she had not seen Nynaeve frown. And you are our new novice. It is always good to see a novice come. We have too few these days. You will make 40. Only 40. And no more than 8 or 9 of those will be raised to the accepted. Though I don't think you will have to worry about that too much, if you work hard and apply yourself. The work is hard, and even for one with the potential they tell me you have, it will not be made any easier. If you cannot stick to it, no matter how hard it is, or if you will break under the strain, better we find it out now and let you go on your way, than wait until you are a full sister and others are depending on you. An Aes Sedai's life is not easy. Here we will prepare you for it, if you have in you what is required. Egwene swallowed. Break under the strain? I will try, Shiriam Sedai, she said faintly. And I will not break. Nynaeve looked at her worriedly. Shiriam... She stopped and took a deep breath. Shiriam Sedai... She seemed to force the honorific out. Does it have to be so hard on her? Flesh and blood can only take so much. I know something of what novices must go through. Surely there's no need to try to break her just to find out how strong she is. You mean what the Amerlin did to you today? Nynaeve's back stiffened. Shiriam looked as though she were trying to keep amusement from her face. I told you I spoke with the Amerlin. Rest your worries for your friend. Novice training is hard, but not that hard. That is for the first few weeks of being one of the accepted. Nynaeve's mouth fell open. Egwene thought the wisdom's eyes were going to come right out of her head. To catch the few who might have slipped through novice training when they should not have. We cannot risk having one of our number, a full Aes Sedai, who will break under the stress of the world outside. The Aes Sedai gathered them both up, an arm around the shoulders of each.
19.
Nynaeve hardly seemed to realize where she was going.
To be continued
Come, Shiriam said.
next time.
I will see you settled in your rooms.
Goodbye. Goodbye.
The White Tower
Goodbye.
awaits.
Chapter 19. Beneath the Dagger.